In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about other people's ideas about networking and LinkedIn, sharing some things that I found this past week. I always am on the lookout for new ideas, new tips, new tricks, new things to help you be a better networker. And I want to share a few of them with you today because I think they help with a couple things with mindset, a very tactical way to reach out to others when you're trying to establish a connection with them, and then just a fun thing you can do on LinkedIn. I don't know if it helps you network, but it's fun to figure this out on LinkedIn, to go find out the information. And who knows, maybe you could use it as a way to start up a conversation with somebody. It's just fun. Sometimes we just have to do things for the fun of it because it's interesting. I want to talk about I want to talk about something called the spotlight effect, the advice triangle, and then how to find your LinkedIn member number, which is when you joined LinkedIn, what person you were in the order of who joined. So who you were in terms of number, right? And I'll tell you mine, I'll tell you how you find it, and I'll also tell you who showed this to me because I think they're an interesting person that you should follow. Let's get started. And the first thing that I want to start with is something called the spotlight effect. And the spotlight effect is something I've been talking to some people with recently. These are people who comment on my posts and subscribe to my newsletter. And I talked a little bit about it in one of my posts. And this person reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you talk a little bit more about this? Because I feel like I suffer from the spotlight effect and it keeps me from networking." So first of all, the spotlight effect is a bias that we all have, a cognitive bias. And Sahil Bloom, who is an online writer, he has a newsletter called The Curiosity Chronicle. He talked about this over the last couple months. And it's a phenomenon where we overestimate how much other people care about us. We all think that the whole world is thinking about us all the time. We think people are worried about us, worried about what we do, and the reality is they're not. If you think about it, if everybody is worried about what people think about them, they're all worried about themselves, they're not worrying about you. They could care less what you're doing. But too often we think that if we say the wrong thing, if we send a note to somebody and it bothers somebody else, that they're going to sit there and dwell on it and think about us and what a terrible person we are and how could we inconvenience them. And in reality, they're not thinking about us at all. I mean, if you think about yourself, are you thinking about what other people did all the time, or are you worried about what you're working on or your own problems? And that's what the spotlight effect is. We think everybody's got the spotlight on us all the time. And in reality, most people don't care. And I fall victim to this all the time. I will mess up in a conversation, or I will say something that I don't think is exactly right, or I will have an interaction that's a little awkward. And I'll just dwell on it and think, oh my God, I totally messed that up. I hope that doesn't ruin my relationship. I hope that person doesn't think I'm stupid. And I have to remind myself, they're not even thinking of me at all. They probably forgot about it, and they don't even know. If I brought it up to them, they'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. So it stops us in networking from reaching out and taking chances and risks because we feel like everybody is thinking about us. And we don't want to be the center of their attention. And so we don't take chances. We don't send that note. We don't reach out to that person. We don't say the thing, that we want to say. And so it keeps us from doing things. So what Sahil Bloom talks about after he explains it is dimming the spotlight. And I'm just showing it here on the screen. You can go, this will be in the link in the show and in my newsletter. But we can just, being aware of it is the first thing to fixing this. If we're aware of this bias and we realize, oh my gosh, we're overthinking this and people aren't thinking about me, that cuts off a lot of it. And once we're over that, another way to combat this is not worrying about being an interesting person to everybody else, but as Sahil says, be interested. ask other people questions. I was on a podcast today. I was being interviewed for it. It comes out in a few months, and I'll link it and share it with you when it comes out. But I was talking about how, as an introvert especially, one of the ways to get past conversations where you feel like you're not participating is to ask questions, ask better questions, and move the conversation along through your questions. So by doing that, you're also taking the spotlight off yourself, whatever you feel like the spotlight is, and putting it on other people and asking them questions. And then the last thing to do with the spotlight effect is just say, so what, right? Like, so what if people are thinking of me? Big deal. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Most likely they aren't, but even if they are, who cares, right? We're going to like move on with our life. It's not going to be that big of a deal. We're making more of it in our head than we should. And so get past this. Don't let this stop you from networking. Take some chances. Realize most people are never really thinking about you anyway. If you screw up, no big deal. Move on and keep networking. That's a spotlight effect. I think it keeps us from networking. So I'm trying to help you and give you a resource to overcome that so that you don't stop networking just because of it. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was something called the advice triangle. And this comes from Austin Belsick. And Austin writes on LinkedIn. He's a career coach. He's always got great ideas. And he has this thing called the advice triangle. And he wrote about it in this post, which of course I'll be linking to the post. But this is a good way to reach out to somebody who's maybe ahead of you in their career or in a place you want to be and start to establish the connection. So what he says is it's a way to open a relationship with anyone, and it helps them see that you're invested in the relationship so that they'll be invested in talking to you. And what you do is you try to figure out two things that you can do in your area, your field. And it's something you could do quickly. It's something you could read, or a course you could take, or a short project you could do to actually help you out in your career. And once you've done that, you want to reach out to somebody who's maybe like could be a mentor for you, or somebody who's doing what you're doing, or an expert in your industry. And you reach out and you tell them that you found their name, and you tell them that you're going to try to strengthen their skills, and you're thinking about either reading this book or taking this course or doing this project. And you're basically asking them, which should I do? If you were me, what would you do? And all they have to respond back is A or B, one choice or the other. All you want to do is get them to reply. You're not asking them for their opinion. Like, you're not asking them to give you an answer. You're just saying, of these two options, if you were me to develop yourself and you were going to do one of these two things, which would it be? And so when they reply and they tell you which one to do, let's say it's read the book, then go read the book and read the book, and then come back and say, hey, I read this book. It was great. Here's what I did. And I would love for your advice on, what to do next. So what this shows people, as Austin says here, is that you asked for their advice, you listened to their advice, you took action, and you're somebody who's going to invest in them. You're not just there, or you're someone who they can invest their time in. And when you ask for advice from them, they're going to share with you, and they're going to say, okay, you look like somebody who I can give my advice to and is going to take it. It's not going to be a waste of my time. That is a cool way, I think, of reaching out to people. You're going to have to do most of the work, or actually all the work, but it's a good way to establish a relationship with somebody you don't really know. Okay, that was the advice triangle. So again, I'm going to share that with you. I think from a networking standpoint, we always worry about how are we going to get in touch with these people who are ahead of us, and how are we going to start the conversation. That's a really good way to do it. Okay, last thing, and this is the thing that's kind of fun, but Jennifer McClure, who's somebody that I have kind of known over the years. I know her because she started an organization called Disrupt HR, which is about giving short talks about the future of HR, and it's kind of trying to disrupt the status quo. she and some other people founded this in Cincinnati like 10 years ago, and they're coming up on their 10th anniversary. I've spoken at a couple of these. I spoke at one, I can't remember what year it was, 2015, and I had a good presentation. It's one of the most watched Disrupt HR talks that there are out there. I'll link it in my newsletter. And Jennifer and I have just kind of connected over the years. She also has a podcast called called the Impact Makers Podcast, which I'm going to be on in the future. And so I'm excited to talk to Jennifer. She's just somebody who's always been out at the forefront of HR, which is what I do in my day job. But she posted this thing about how to find the date you created your LinkedIn profile. And so I went through and did this. I had never heard of this before. I mean, I knew how I could find my LinkedIn, my first profile date, like the date I created my profile, but I didn't know how to find my member number. And so this kind of walked me through it. And again, the links will all be in the newsletter here. But you know, what do you do with this? I mean, I've been on LinkedIn since 2005. February of 2005, my very first connection was one of my college roommates. And of course, he and I are still in touch. But, 2005, it's 18 years that I've been on LinkedIn. And I would say for the first 10 years or so, there was a period of time when I was a recruiter. So I did a lot more on LinkedIn, but then I didn't do a lot with it. So I would say, there's been times when I've been more active. Of course, in the last 5 years or so, I've been a lot more active and really kind of growing on here. It's a different place than it was in the beginning. It really used to just be an online resume and a way to kind of organize your connections. It was like an online Rolodex. But now it's a whole new social media platform. So interesting to go in. I had never seen this before. You may have never seen this before. You have to do a little bit of work in the code behind LinkedIn, but you can go in and find your member. And I'm member 2,001,545. So I was in almost the first 2 million people to join LinkedIn, which doesn't sound like a lot, but right now LinkedIn is almost at 1 billion users. So what was I like in the first 5% of people who are currently on LinkedIn in terms of users? Like I said, just kind of a fun thing to do. I'm always looking for tips and tricks on LinkedIn. I think it's an interesting social media platform that's going to be around for a while. If you can go in and you find your number, please come back and tell me, share it, put it in the comments, of the newsletter, and, just have a little bit of fun with it. If you have any other great LinkedIn tips or any other stuff that you think you want to share with me and that I can share with all of our audience, that would be awesome. Sometimes other people have great ideas, and I love sharing those with my audience. One of the things I think about is curating content, and that is finding the best ideas and bringing them to all of you. So I'm not always going to talk about what I think or what I came up with. I'm often going to share what other people are doing because I think that's helpful, right? We all learn by sharing information and knowledge. I talk about sharing knowledge in your networking and networking for knowledge. So sometimes in these episodes, in these issues, I'm going to talk about other people's stuff, and I hope you enjoy it. If, as always, please send me questions. If you have things you're struggling with, that'd be great. But if you have found somebody else who's doing cool stuff with networking or helping people out, I would love to meet them. I would love to follow them. Please share with me. I'm certainly not the person who thinks they know everything, and I have sort of no problem working with other people who are in the same space as me. So I would love to meet other people. Feel free to introduce us, or if there's people you'd like me to introduce you to, please let me know. Have a great week. Go out, meet some interesting people. Remember, always be connecting.